autumn officially arrived yesterday morning, and here on Weather World, that means it's time for another visit from our resident astronomer, Dr. Chris Palma, from the Penn State Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and now also Associate Dean for undergraduate students in the Eberly College of Science.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Yes, it's good to have you back.
Thank you.
Don't think we won't continue to ask the tough questions, though.
Please,
okay,
please do.
My wife and I spent a lot of time this summer watching PBS. It was their Summer of Space. You probably knew that.
Yep.
And they had a fascinating series about the planets. I guess when it comes to Jupiter, the Juno probe has found some really interesting things.
Yeah. And again, this is one of those ones overlaps with meteorology, right?
Yeah.
It's so Juno, I don't think it's talked about as much as some of the other planetary missions, but it's really unique in that it's going on a polar orbit. It's going from the North Pole to the South Pole, and it swoops really low. So we're getting much better data on Jupiter than previous satellites. But we found that the atmosphere near the equator, the layer is really thick, whereas you go further north, the atmospheric layers get thinner, and then the storm systems at the North Pole are apparently completely different than the ones at the South Pole. So really interesting atmospheric science on Jupiter.
And that's a planet that's a gas giant anyway,
Yes.
for the most part. So moving one planet out.
Yeah.
NASA actually has a plan to send, I guess it's a drone-type vehicle to Saturn's largest moon, Titan.
Yeah.
And there's a Penn State connection to there. Why Titan, and what is the Penn State connection?
Yeah. So Titan, it's just a fascinating object. And I think the moons of our solar system often don't get talked about as much as the planets do. But if Titan were orbiting the sun by itself, unattached to Saturn, we would refer to it as a planet. It's larger than Mercury. It has a thick atmosphere as far as moons go. And what's very interesting about Titan is there are liquids on its surface, not water, but there are liquids on its surface that are often suggested to be very similar to like gasoline flowing on the surface. So we want to send vehicles to explore this world because if there's liquids and there's an atmosphere, there's a potential for life. So that's why Titan. The Penn State connection is, think about the challenge of building a vehicle to explore a planet that is colder than any place on Earth, that has an atmosphere thinner than Earth, and when the vehicle gets there, it has to work with no one to repair it.
Yeah.
So the Penn State engineers get to do the job of sorting all that out to make sure that this copter can withstand the cold, can communicate to Earth, and will not break down.
Penn State Aerospace Engineering.
Yes, yeah.
A little closer to Earth, just a couple weeks ago, I saw that India tried to land an unmanned probe on the moon, but there were problems. You know, why is this still so hard to do? I mean, didn't we solve this problem 50 years ago?
I mean, yes and no. To me, I look at it as it's amazing how successful we were in the 60s and 70s, right?
You're right.
These are challenges. And what happened, the moon is 100,000 times further away than the orbit where we typically place satellites. So it took weeks and weeks for this probe to get there. Then you have to gently land a robot on the surface and have it land. And again, there's no one there to fix it. It was mostly successful, and it's now tilted on its side.
Oh, it's tilted.
Yeah, and that's the crucial, that minor issue is really what's preventing it from being a successful mission.
I saw some other recent news, detection for the first time of water vapor in the atmosphere of a planet orbiting another star. I mean, this seems huge, say, for the possibilities of life elsewhere, but I guess there are, as always, caveats.
So we've talked many times, is this the next Earth? That's what exoplanet folks, many of whom are interested. Can I find a planet much like Earth, relatively the same temperature, presence of water, similar atmosphere? So this was reported early to be a super Earth, which means it's bigger than Earth, and yes, there's a direct detection of water vapor. The problem is, as we've learned more, looked at the data more deeply, it looks, rather than this being a scaled up version of Earth, this planet is likely a scaled down version of Neptune.
Oh.
So it is probably a gas giant like planet rather than a rocky world with liquid oceans and water. Yeah. So that was really that's the caveat for this particular world.
Another recent story that kind of surprised me, a new study suggests that the universe might actually be 2 billion years younger than originally thought. I didn't even know this was still a thing.
Yeah,
I mean, what's
yeah.
your take on that study?
Well, it's funny because as a student, years and years ago, this was think about the measurements you have to do to try and estimate the age of the universe. It's not an easy measurement to make. People staked their entire careers, decades of effort, and for years this was an argument. Is the universe young? Is the universe old? The Hubble Space Telescope over 20 years ago really helped pin this number down. Now we're at the era, so most people have accepted, okay, we think we know it pretty well. Now we're at the time where new missions are looking at new data that give us new insight in the age of the universe, and they don't all agree.
Gotcha.
So what's likely going to happen is we're going to find that this new method, as it gets refined, will reflect the age that we've always known, but at least the preliminary data shows
Okay.
a discrepancy.
We always like to close by just giving you an opportunity to suggest some star watching tips.
Yeah. So Jupiter and Saturn look beautiful, so I can't ignore them. But if you can find Saturn, what I really want people to do is look straight up from Saturn, because Saturn is essentially very well aligned with the plane of the Milky Way. So if you look up from Saturn, you should notice there's many, many, many more stars in that band than there would be on either side. So look for Saturn, but look for evidence that you're seeing the Milky Way at the same time.
As long as we can get the clouds out of the way and there's not too much artificial light.
Yes, yeah.
Chris, always good to see you.
Thank you
Thanks
very much.
for stopping by.